Before we get much further, I should let you know that I have some anger management issues. Now you know. So, where are we headed today with Happy Taxi? No, sorry. What I mean is, the customer is always king.
Road 96 is a narrative-driven adventure game developed and published by DigiX Art and released on August 16, 2021. The developer's previous games include 2018's 1111 Memories Retold and 2016's Lost in Harmony. Road 96 puts players in the role of a runaway teen who is seeking to flee the fictional country of Petria by crossing the border. The game is set in the summer of 1996, and Petria is currently run by President Tirak, who is a divisive leader and the bulk of the driving force behind most of the characters that the runaway will meet. Before we dive too much deeper, this is a narrative-heavy game, so story is right at the forefront. Giving out too many story details will ruin the game for many players, so because of this, we'll be very light on spoilers. As players start their journey through Petria, they'll be asked a series of questions. During our time with the game, it was unclear if these responses made any impact on the overall narrative. This wasn't a deal breaker though, as the story itself evolves as players progress through it. Road 96's narrative is told through a series of encounters with many colorful characters. During each narrative arc, players will be given decisions either through actions taken in the world, such as defacing a propaganda poster of President Tirak, or verbally agreeing to rebellion as the correct path to freedom. Every action decides which fork the journey will take and is wonderfully illustrated with the massive web that make up the many paths out of the country. The writing itself isn't half bad, and this is not a game that could claim to be apolitical. At the highest level, the narrative focuses on government cover-ups, fake news, and police brutality to name a few, which it hits with a striking mix of satire and harsh realities. While Road 96 does a great job exploring these topics, we found ourselves more intrigued by the subtle themes on display from what we've dubbed the key non-playable characters. While there are plenty of NPCs to chat with in Petria, only 7 have their own major character arcs, ergo, key NPCs. These key NPCs range from a young rebellious teen named Zoe, desperate to escape her lineage, to an old trucker named John who constantly falls asleep at the wheel and is longing for someone who passed away a long time ago. While these characters all have their own political leanings, they don't continuously shove their opinions into players' faces. Instead, they focus on a more personal tale with sometimes hilarious and often endearing events surrounding them. During a moment with Zoe on our first playthrough, we found ourselves tooting a horn horribly while she laughed her ass off. The more we played the horn, the more she laughed, and the faster the tempo became. After a bit, the world started to fade away. Everything around us became visibly darkened, and it was just us and this girl we just met a few moments ago sharing a genuine moment. For just a few seconds, the trip we had taken to get there didn't seem to matter. While both of us were runaways, we were able to forget about ourselves and the issues of the country and just enjoy each other's company. Luckily, exceptional moments like this are just one of many that players will experience during Road 96's narratives.
Put that away before I come up there!
As mentioned before, this is primarily a narrative-driven game much in the same vein as a Telltale title. We played the pre-release Steam version, which fully supports controller. We're happy to say that outside of a few hiccups here and there, it's more than reasonable to play the whole game this way. On controller, to select dialogue or actions, players will move the right joystick to place the reticle over the desired option, followed by a quick push of the A or X button to lock it in. That's basically most of the controls. Gameplay swaps between fixed location sections, where the only choices are specific options around said location, and free roaming sections. These free roaming sections play out within a confined area where players can search and interact with all sorts of things. These include defacing posters, stealing money and food, and eventually being able to lockpick or hack certain items. Speaking of hacking and lockpicking, as the story progresses and players get to know the key NPCs, they'll eventually unlock abilities that enable new actions. These include practical skills like lockpicking and hacking, as well as more intangible skills like increased chance on probability attempts. Probability comes into play when a pair of dice appears next to an option. This is a percent chance to succeed when begging for food, spotting something beneath the car seat, and so on. Talking to people and finding things aren't the only activities in Road 96 though. There are a lot of well-made minigames that have no right to be as good as they are. Earlier we talked about blowing on the horn, which requires matching lines by moving the cursor up and down. Throughout our experience though, we found ourselves playing Pong on an arcade cabinet and facing down opponents in a very well-made version of air hockey. Those are just the ones we could share without spoiling too much, as everything on offer is fantastic. These were a welcome addition and really kept the momentum of the game moving forward. Distractions aside, the core goal of the game is to escape Petria, but not just the one time. The game is broken up into encounters and episodes. As players continue down the road to reach Road 96, which happens to be where the border is, they'll be presented with multiple ways to escape. Runaways may try to smuggle themselves out by paying a smuggler, hide in a truck and hope not to be spotted, or even try some underground tunnels. On our first attempt, we made our way through the tunnels and successfully left Petria, but that wasn't the end of the story. After clearing or failing an attempt to escape Petria, a new episode a little closer to the September election is unlocked. While the next episode is booted up, Sonia Sanchez, a key NPC who is also a reporter, will report on the results of their previous attempt. This was probably one of our favorite parts of the whole game. At the start of our second run, she reported that our first teen's escape was fake news, and moved on from there. At the beginning of each episode after the first, players will also be given the option of 3 new teens who are at different distances from the border and have different starting health as well. Once a runaway is chosen, they start on a different path which will lead to new encounters with the key NPCs in different places on their route. To end our rant on how interesting the gameplay is in Road 96, depending on how players escape, the world will change. Escaping through the tunnels like we did our first time will result in that path being cut off for the next run. We were told that there is a landslide that filled the tunnel so we can no longer take that path. On our later run, after a couple of clears, there was a police barricade stopping us from taking the path we did the previous 2 times. So instead, we found another path and ziplined our butts down to a new area near the border and continued on our way. These iterative changes made each and every one of our hour-long runs that much better. It honestly made the game world feel that much more organic each time we met a new person, made a choice that affected the world, and found ourselves wondering what would change the next time we went through. Needless to say, this was a really addicting element for us. Unfortunately, the game isn't 100% perfect. During the narrator sections and in other areas as well, voice cues seem a bit rushed through. The opening lines in particular sounded like the audio files are being played too quickly and came off very unnatural. Outside of that though, the music on tap fits the game really well, and the voiceover performances range from decent to great, outside of Sonia, who sounded like she was from a completely different game. Speaking of Sonia, that's honestly where another point of contention with Road 96 comes to bear, not because of her personality, but how she looks. The graphical style of Road 96 is very stylized, but Sonia and a few other characters, objects, and scenes look pretty bad in the daylight. Edges have been made rough intentionally, but characters, especially Sonia, look like they belong in Leisure Suit Larry or The Sims instead. What's perhaps more jarring is when there is a scene with characters at night, the game looks 100% better. Now this is probably due to the rough edges disappearing in the darker shadows, but seeing such beautiful graphics at night compared to during the day is a bit odd. The only other thing to point out, which is a minor gripe, is the odd moment we encounter with a magic door. From the inside it looked like a nice sunny day, but once you walk through the door, the game remembered it was actually nighttime. Again, this was a minor gripe, but definitely immersion breaking. Honestly, after an hour or so, the graphical style starts to make sense and these concerns fade into the background as the story takes center stage. For first impressions though, not the best display. Most of the world of Road 96 is a bit bland outside of a few key features. Burger joints are very basic, most NPCs are bare bones, and cars use a really nasty texture, which again is definitely more about style than laziness here. However, our favorite still being Zoe, we were impressed by how instead of just throwing her into a ratty black tank top, some jeans and combat boots, the designers took a lot of care into turning her into her own person. In one scene, Zoe sports black boots tagged with pink and blue, ripped and faded jeans, a tank top with an alien plastered over it, a piercing over her right eye, and of course some freckles to finish it all out. Looking closer, even her black nail polish is visibly chipped. That is some attention to detail. That said, while the graphical style has some really big misses here and there, it also has so many hits that they balance themselves out. It somehow works, and we're happy that it does. After making our way down many roads towards freedom, capture, and sometimes death, we have to admit that Road 96 is a damn fine game. The story, writing, and voice acting all bring the world of Petria to life and cement the game as a narrative wonder. The narrative is then elevated further through the use of amazingly well-motivated and detailed characters who sometimes look not so great, but provide moments of endearment we haven't experienced in a game for quite a while. Finally, the ever-changing narrative and evolving world make gameplay immersive and engaging. Even after finishing the game, we can't wait to see what else Road 96 has in store for us.
I don't know if I believe you.